Psilocybin is a naturally occurring psychedelic substance, and it's produced by psilocybin mushrooms, also called magic mushrooms. With the modern revival of psychedelic research, psilocybin is now being investigated for its potential to help people overcome depression and anxiety. Psilocybin is a so-called classic psychedelic that belongs to a group of hallucinogenic tryptamines. There's over 100 species of hallucinogenic magic mushrooms containing psilocybin. These mushrooms grow in many different parts of the world and have been used ritually by many different cultures for at least 3,000 years. Despite the recent renaissance in psychedelic research, there's a lot of controversy surrounding psilocybin's use, its current and future legal status, and its potential therapeutic effects. Not many people know the whole story behind the traditional use of psilocybin-containing mushrooms, nor about the efforts that produced our current state of knowledge about it. Psilocybin is a naturally occurring psychedelic compound found in psilocybe mushrooms. Modern research is finally starting to catch up with their age-old traditional use, although the topic is still surrounded by considerable mystery and controversy. In the first clinical study of psilocybin in 12 people with treatment-resistant depression, psilocybin was reported to greatly reduce depressive symptoms for up to 3 months after the initial experience. It was given in a supportive setting at 2 increasing doses, 10 milligrams and 25 milligrams. It also improved anxiety and the ability to feel pleasure. In another trial, psilocybin improved symptoms in 15 people with treatment-resistant depression. Just 1 week after the session, they were less pessimistic and their mood had improved. Overall, psilocybin, along with psychological support, enabled them to gain a more positive and accurate outlook on life. Encouraged by these findings, larger clinical trials of psilocybin in people with treatment-resistant depression are currently underway. Anxiety in people with life-threatening diseases is often overlooked, although it's linked to poor mental health and clinical outcomes. Psilocybin can help these people by drastically changing their outlook on life for the better. Finding meaning can transform despair into a positive self-exploration. When administered in a safe and supportive environment, psilocybin sessions have been reported to help people regain a sense of meaning, lessen their anxieties about death, and improve overall mood. In a trial of 12 patients in advanced stages of cancer, a modest dose of psilocybin improved mood 2 weeks later, which was sustained for 6 months. It also reduced anxiety for 3 months after the treatment. None of the patients reported experiencing anxiety from psilocybin or a bad trip, likely because the setting was very controlled and safe in the study. In a study of 51 cancer patients with depression, high doses of psilocybin, 20 to 30 milligrams, were reported to reduce depression, anxiety, and fear of death, while also increasing the patient's reported quality of life and overall sense of optimism. These changes were sustained for up to 6 months following their initial treatment. According to the study's author, the reported ability of psilocybin to enhance the patient's overall sense of well-being may stem from changing their attitude toward life, relationships, and spirituality. Finally, in another trial of 29 cancer patients, a single dose of psilocybin was reported to rapidly and long-lastingly reduce anxiety and depression symptoms. The treatment was reported to reduce hopelessness, improve spiritual well-being, and increase the overall quality of life. Most patients continued to improve further even after 7 months post-treatment. According to a single preliminary trial in 9 psychiatric patients, psilocybin was reported to reduce obsessive-compulsive disorder symptoms. In the study, each patient received a total of 4 separate doses of varying sizes, each a week apart. Interestingly, while the doses used in the study ranged from very small microdoses of 25 micrograms per kg to very large doses of 300 micrograms per kg. The study's author reported that these differences in dose size did not appear to matter as much as one might expect. Every patient included in the study reported experiencing improvements in their symptoms regardless of the specific size of each individual dose. Although additional data in humans is currently lacking, one animal study has reported that psilocybin reduced obsessive-compulsive-like behaviors, which was marble burying in mice. Scientists first noted the potential of psychedelics like psilocybin for treating addiction back in the 50s. They realized that the insight-promoting effects that they produced may encourage sobriety. That's when the term psychedelic was coined, meaning mind manifesting. Now, after many decades of scientific neglect, psilocybin is slowly re-emerging as a proposed option for overcoming tobacco and alcohol addiction, as well as many other substance abuse disorders. Researchers have suggested that psilocybin may have a number of important qualities that may make it helpful as a future treatment for addiction disorders. Psilocybin itself is not believed to be addictive. It's also reported to have low toxicity, at least when compared to many other drugs of abuse. It appears to be relatively safe when administered in a well-controlled and safe environment, i.e., the frequency of bad trips or otherwise adverse consequences appears to be relatively low when taken under controlled conditions. Perhaps the most promising future of psilocybin in the context of addiction treatment is that it appears to be able to trigger long-term changes in behavior and thinking after just a single session. If true, this could be a huge advantage over other common forms of addiction treatment, which typically require a lot of long-term medication, ongoing therapy, and/or many other types of time and resource-intensive interventions. According to one preliminary study of 10 patients with alcohol dependence, psilocybin was reported to help promote long-term abstinence from alcohol use. The initial psilocybin session was accompanied by 3 months of follow-up motivational therapy, and the benefits were reported to persist for up to 6 months later. According to one early clinical trial, psilocybin was reported to help chronic cigarette smokers quit without apparent side effects. The smokers in the study were given both a moderate 20 mg per 70 kg body weight and a high 30 mg per 70 kg body weight psilocybin dose over the course of the 15-week cessation period. 6 months later, 12 out of the 15 patients reported having completely quit smoking cigarettes. This finding is particularly noteworthy because the success reported was 80%, and it's considerably higher than the typical reports by other common forms of smoking cessation therapy, which usually only have a success rate of 35% or less. Additionally, the study also reported that the stronger or more intense the mystical experience that an individual patient reported, then the greater the reduction that they reported in cigarette cravings that they experienced over the next 6 months after the initial treatment. Based on the findings from several of the studies described, multiple researchers have proposed that it may be the mystical experiences that psilocybin elicits, such as the profound awe and overcoming a limited sense of self, that may be responsible for the many subsequent long-lasting psychological benefits. For example, the cancer patients who reported having more intense mystical experiences also reported relatively larger improvements in their overall mood and their well-being. Similarly, patients with alcohol dependence were more likely to maintain sobriety if they had a strong mystical experience from the psilocybin. According to some researchers, findings such as these may signal a shift from the current medical framework to one in which psychological experiences may have more wide-ranging benefits than previously thought. In one recent study, 30 religious or spiritual people who've never previously taken psychedelics each underwent an 8-hour psilocybin session at 30 milligrams per 70 kg body weight. After 2 months, they rated their psilocybin experience as having been one of the greatest personal, meaning, and spiritual significant experiences of their life. According to another study, after 14 months follow-up, almost 70% of the study's former participants rated their psilocybin experience as being among the 5 most meaningful and spiritually significant experiences of their lives. And additionally, 64% of the participants indicated that this experience had increased their overall well-being or their life satisfaction. Several researchers have proposed that the mystical experiences induced by psilocybin may be responsible for many of the purported psychological benefits associated with psychedelic treatments. Many participants in these studies have reported having experienced a positive shift in their well-being, spirituality, and their overall perception of life. In addition to radically altering consciousness and perception, psilocybin is also believed to have a variety of potential effects on mood and emotions. According to one preliminary study in 17 healthy human participants, psilocybin was reported to increase positive emotions and enhance overall mood. Additionally, when participants were shown pictures of other people, their attention tended to shift towards focusing more on positive emotions and facial cues, while reducing attention towards negative emotions and facial cues. One other study in 25 healthy volunteers reported that psilocybin may enhance overall mood, possibly by decreasing the activity of the amygdala, a brain region commonly associated with fear, anxiety, and other negative emotional states. Repeatedly, patients with mood and anxiety-related disorders have been reported to have relatively increased amygdala activity, which may be involved in some of the primary symptoms of these psychiatric disorders. Based on findings like these, some researchers have suggested that psilocybin and other psychedelics may have future potential as treatments for these mental health conditions, but much more additional research would be needed to say this for sure. You could check out my video on CBD and blood flow in the brain for more information on reducing the overactivity in the amygdala, or my video on PTSD for more alternative health options. A handful of studies have reported that psilocybin appears to induce dreamlike states when used by healthy volunteers. In fact, there's a lot of similarities between the psychedelic state and the dream state, like an altered state of perception, intensified mental imagery, amplified emotional responses, and reduced memory for negative stimuli and emotions such as fear. While the mechanisms involved in psilocybin's effect remain largely mysterious, some scientists believe that psilocybin and other psychedelics may act on many of the same brain regions and pathways that are commonly associated with out-of-body experiences. Psilocybin has been reported to induce dreamlike states with altered perceptions, emotional reactivity, and memories. Some researchers believe that these effects could potentially tell us a lot about the brain mechanisms involved in dreaming and other altered states of consciousness, although a lot more research would be needed to understand these effects and their potential mechanisms involved. Although creativity can be a very difficult phenomenon to describe and study scientifically, psilocybin and other psychedelics have been associated with a number of individual psychological and behavioral measures of creativity, like enhanced cognitive flexibility, increased divergent thinking, increased mental associations, unique use of language and words, intense mental imagery, and an increased tendency to find or perceive deep meaning in music or other stimuli. However, the exact mechanisms behind these effects and their relationship to human creativity in general is still unclear and hotly debated. Therefore, the current evidence is still much too early to conclude whether psychedelics have any significant or meaningful effect on a person's creative ability. You could see my other video on microdosing to learn more about the potential mechanisms involved in increasing creativity and IQ from psychedelics. Initial studies in the 50s gave birth to psychedelic psychotherapy, a concept that's being researched again. Most of the mentioned studies in the article have shown the benefits of psilocybin only in combination with psychotherapy. Psilocybin administered without psychological support and a supportive environment may have limited benefits and in rare cases even worsen someone's condition. Psilocybin has been used with specific types of music to support meaning-making, emotional response and mental imagery in a psychotherapeutic environment. Music may play an important role in facilitating the benefits of psychedelic therapy, but more research in this field is needed. According to a few preliminary animal studies, psilocybin may have some future potential in treating the development or the symptoms of PTSD. For example, according to one animal study, psilocybin treatment was reported to reduce behavioral signs of fear and anxiety in traumatized mice that developed a PTS-like condition due to exposure to repeated, unpredictable electric shocks. Interestingly, relatively low doses of psilocybin were reported to be more effective than higher doses for this. In another animal study in mice, psilocybin was reported to stimulate neurogenesis, which is the growth and the development of new neurons in the hippocampus, which is a major brain area involved in emotions, mood, and memory. Related studies have reported that blocking hippocampal neurogenesis in mice often intensifies their emotional responses to fear-induced stimuli, which may suggest that increasing neurogenesis in this brain region may potentially help to counteract these emotional responses. Repeatedly, brain imaging studies in humans have reported that patients with post-traumatic stress disorder often have smaller hippocampi, which may imply that these patients could potentially benefit from increased neurogenesis in this brain region. Other studies have reported that increased hippocampal volume is associated with better treatment outcomes in human post-traumatic stress disorder patients. Neurogenesis is not only important in PTSD. In fact, the growth and the development of new neurons throughout the brain has also been associated with improved mental health, cognition, and better recovery from brain injuries. Some early cell and animal studies have reported that psilocybin can help to increase both neurogenesis and synaptogenesis, which is the development of new neuronal connections in the brain of traumatized mice. Psilocin and other similar psychedelics also have been reported to increase the branching of brain cells and to stimulate synaptic plasticity throughout the prefrontal cortex, both of which are processes that are crucial for mental health and cognition. According to early studies in animals and cells, psilocybin may help to stimulate neurogenesis and synaptic plasticity, both of which are believed to be crucial for mood, cognition, and overall brain health. Although psilocybin is well known for its profound effects on perception, it may also have some significant effects on cognitive processing. However, the evidence available so far is mixed and sometimes conflicting. For example, according to several human studies, psilocybin slowed down reaction times, which was processing speed, but didn't reduce the accuracy of the memory. However, it may reduce focused attention and make concentrating more difficult. In a study of 20 hallucinogen users, psilocybin was not reported to cause major cognitive impairments. However, it did alter working memory, especially at relatively high doses of 30 milligrams per 70 kgs of body weight. According to early research in animals, low doses of psychedelics may reduce inflammation. Substances similar to psilocybin are currently being explored as potential anti-inflammatory treatments, although much more data would be needed for a solid conclusion on this. Microdosing has become increasingly popular over the years, spreading over the internet communities and the media. Many different groups of people ranging from students to businessmen, are reporting that psychedelic microdosing supposedly improves their cognition and their problem-solving skills. Others claim that it helps them with everyday functioning. So far, the only studies that have been done on microdosing are based primarily on subjective reports from casual users who microdose on their own outside of a medical or a research setting. Microdoses are typically considered anything that's 10 to 20 times less than a full dose, which typically amounts to about 0.1 to 0.3 grams of Psilocybin cubensis mushrooms for the average person. However, it should be noted that the potency of individual mushrooms, even within the same species, can vary considerably. Additionally, some people may be more sensitive to psychedelics than other people. Ultimately, this means that it can be very difficult, if not impossible, to accurately dose psychedelics, except through trial and error. One study recruited 21 people who experimented with microdosing. They reported improved mood, cognition, and creativity. Most considered that the beneficial effects helped them to counteract anxiety and depression. However, others found psychedelic microdosing to be challenging and unhelpful. According to the participants of one study, microdoses were not reported to significantly alter perception or functioning. However, slightly larger doses, a quarter of a full dose, also known as a mini dose, was reported to interfere with work and everyday activity. Experienced users microdosed for a couple of weeks or months, 1 to 3 times per week, and then stopped for a period of time. However, some participants reported microdosing on a daily basis. According to one very preliminary study, very low doses, 0.014 to 0.043 milligrams per kg of psilocybin, were reported to improve mood in 51 cancer patients. However, its potential effects on otherwise healthy humans remains unknown. Psilocybin microdosing, taking 10 to 20 times lower dose, has become popular among certain recreational users of psychedelics. Microdosing supposedly boosts cognition and creativity without altering consciousness. For more information on this, check out my video on microdosing. Currently, psilocybin is under investigation primarily for mental health uses. Some research suggests a potential for use in treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, and a handful of other conditions. The information contained in this video is only a review of science, and it's not an endorsement for the consumption of any psychedelic drug unless in a controlled setting under medical supervision, for example, as a volunteer in a state-funded clinical drug trial.